Good morning, everyone. So, in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about anorectal sepsis. So, anorectal sepsis is one of the most important clinical or surgical entity that is every medical personnel should know about that. The reason is it is very common, and it is the surgical admissions. Every surgical admissions, at least there will be 2 or 3 patients with anorectal sepsis. So we need to know the basis, the problem behind anorectal sepsis and how it is occurs, and all kind of details we need to discuss today. So when we take the anorectal sepsis, there are 2 kinds of anorectal sepsis we are going to discuss. So that is also, it depends on the time period how the sepsis occurs. When it is an acute conditions, that is present as acute anorectal abscess. But when it is a chronic sepsis for some time period, then it is called chronic anal fistula. So these are the main 2 kinds of anorectal sepsis that we need to discuss. Can I ask a question? The question is, what's the relationship between an anorectal abscess and the anal fistula? I'll ask someone.
Sir, anal abscess may lead to anal fistula as a complication.
Okay, yeah, very good. So you should know there's a relationship between the anorectal abscess as well as the anal fistula. So what is the relationship? One is the inadequate treatment of anorectal abscesses can lead to chronic anal fistula. The second reason is there are some organisms. So we are going to discuss there are different organisms that is mainly provoke anorectal abscess as well as anal fistulas. So that is what we are going to discuss today. So first of all, the first condition is the anorectal abscess. Again, it is one of the very common condition, and it is the most important part of anorectal sepsis. So before we go into the details, there's a true or false question. So it is asked as a perianal abscess, whether it is managed non-surgically or it's a cryptoglandular in origin. So what do you mean by cryptoglandular in origin? And the other stem is the patients with diabetes mellitus are affected, whether it is commoner in males than females, and needs breaking of all loculi during draining. So this is one of the true or false questions we need to discuss after the discussion. So next true or false question, again perianal abscess. So everybody know the perianal abscess is different from whatever we call anorectal abscess. So perianal abscess and anorectal abscesses are not same. Perianal abscess is part of anorectal abscess. So that is the differences we should be identified. So perianal abscess, it leads to the development of fistula in ano. It's relatively painless, whether it is relatively painless, whether it is present with fever, whether it is drained by cruciate incision, and good healing after drainage reduces the recurrence. So that is the other questions we need to discuss. The third true or false question, again it is regarding an anorectal abscess. Fistula formation is predictable. So that is, we need to discuss how we can predict a fistula formation with the perianal abscess. So whether we can predict a fistula formation or not. Common organism is Staphylococcus aureus. So we need to discuss that. Surgical drainage is done when the fluctuation over the abscess is present, and the peak incidence occur in the 6th decade. So the age period also, it is very important, and which decades or which age limits the people will get perianal abscess or anorectal abscess. And the istiorectal abscess is the commonest. So we have to find out what are the types of anorectal abscess and what is the common type. Out of the anorectal abscesses, what is the commonest type? So that is the one we need to discuss. Okay. So can anyone answer? Yeah. My question is whether the fistula formation is predictable or not. So whenever somebody is having an abscess, perianal abscess, can we predict whether he can develop a fistula formation or not? So we will see what is the answer. So the other question is the common organism is Staphylococcus aureus. So we have to find out what is the commonest organism and what is the surgical or clinical implications according to the organism, because the organism also, it is very important to know whether the perianal abscess can turn into a fistula or not. So remember, the organism is very important. So that is also we have to discuss. So anorectal abscess, what do you mean by anorectal abscess? There are anal glands. Around the anus there are anal glands. So usually people will have 0 to 10 anal glands, and it secretes some mucus, and that mucus is different from the mucus secreted by the anal epithelium. So this is kind of a different the mucus, and it is usually thought that it is released because it's lubricate the stools whenever the person is defecating. So whenever the anal gland is infected, then people will get perianal anorectal abscesses. So that is the important things we should understand about the anorectal abscess. That is the infection of the anal glands. So that is how people develop anorectal abscess. And it is more common in males, right? Compared to the female, it is 2:1 in ratio. And the usual age is, it's about 3rd and 4th decades. Right? It is from 30s to until the 50s is the common age of occurrence of anorectal abscess. So next things, we have to find out the types. What are the types of anorectal abscess? What are the types of anorectal abscess? So anorectal abscess, we can divide it into 5 types. The perianal abscess is the commonest type. So 60% of the anorectal abscesses are perianal abscess. So perianal abscess is not equal to anorectal abscess. So remember that way. So whenever you see any questions about perianal abscess, it's a separate entity. But whenever you get a questions about anorectal abscess, the other entities or other types of anorectal abscess is also included in that. So perianal abscesses is the commonest type. It's a 60%. And the next common type, that is 30% of the time, there will be a istiorectal abscess. So that is, it's in the istiorectal fossa. So that is the other common, the second common type of anorectal abscess. Or sometimes we can have an intersphincteric abscess. Intersphincteric abscess, everybody knows in anal sphincter, there are 2 types of anal sphincter. You have an internal anal sphincter and you have an external anal sphincter. So whenever there's an abscess, it occurs in between these 2 sphincters, internal and external anal sphincters. So that is what we call intersphincteric abscess. Then there will be a supralevator or pelvirectal abscess. So these are rare. And sometimes we will get a submucous abscess. So we can feel the abscess whenever we do a digital rectal examination. The abscess is under the mucosa of the anus. So that is what we call submucous abscess. So these are the types of abscesses. So everybody knows, everybody should know there are 5 types of anorectal abscess. And out of these, the perianal abscess is the commonest type. And the second common type is the istiorectal abscess. So these are the types you can see. So the first one you can see, that is the commonest type, that is a perianal abscess, right? It is very superficial to the skin. And the second type, it is the istiorectal abscess, that is in the istiorectal fossa. And the third one is the intersphincteric abscess. So you can see the internal sphincter as well as the external sphincter, and this abscess is situated in between that. And the supralevator, it is above the levator muscle. So levator, any it is above the levator ani, so that is what we call it's a supralevator abscess. And the submucous abscess is just underneath the mucosa of the anal canal. So these are the types we should know. So if we take the development of an anorectal abscess, there are two theories how the anorectal abscess develops. So first one we call is a Parkes cryptoglandular theory, and the other one is the theory is the consequence of skin appendage infection. So Parkes cryptoglandular theory says the cryptogland at the level of the dentate line become blocked, and that will lead to the bacterial overgrowth, and that will lead to anorectal abscess. So why this theory is very, very important? Because the organism involving this type of abscesses are from rectal common cells. So we will discuss later the E. coli. So E. coli is the common organisms that will cause us anorectal abscess, and that is comes from the rectal common cells. So that is how it is causing an infection in the crypt gland, and that is what we call Parkes cryptoglandular theory. But is it always the bowel organism is causing anorectal abscess? The answer is no. There are sometimes skin appendage infections due to skin common cells, right? That is also can lead to perianal abscess or a anorectal abscess. So Staphylococcus aureus is the common skin common cell, so that is how it is causing an infection there. So that is why two theories are there. So we have a Parkes cryptoglandular theory, that is the abscess is formed by the rectal common cells or bowel organism, so the common organism is E. coli, or you can have an infection from the skin appendages, so that is the common organism is Staphylococcus aureus, so that is also can lead to perianal abscess. So in this you should understand one thing, that is whenever you have infections due to rectal or bowel common cells, they have more prone to develop fistulas later on. So perianal fistulas can be predictable whenever the organism is E. coli. But when it comes to skin common cells that is causing an anorectal abscess or a perianal abscess, that is very unlikely to cause fistula formation. So with organisms, you can predict whether the patient will develop a fistula formation later on or not. So that is the most important clinical implications according to these theories. So this is what we have discussed about the organisms. So the most common organism is E. coli. So 60% of anorectal abscess, it is the common organism is E. coli. And then you can have other bowel organisms. And the Staphylococcus aureus, it is a skin common cell, so that is also can cause us perianal or anorectal abscess. So in this, we should understand whenever the infection is due to E. coli or a bowel organism or a rectal organism, the patient more prone to develop a fistula formation. But when the organism is Staphylococcus, this organism is from the skin, and most of the people don't develop fistula formation. So that is the surgical implications about the organisms. So single best answer question. A 50-year-old male has presented with acute perianal abscess. He has had frequent loose motions, occasionally mixed with blood, on and off for many months. He also suffers from a colicky abdominal pain, and he has a feeling of heaviness in his right iliac fossa. On examination, he has an acute perianal abscess and a mass in the right iliac fossa. So what is the most probable diagnosis? So in this question, we should understand what is the relationship between the right iliac fossa heaviness as well as right iliac fossa mass and then perianal abscess. So what is the relationship between these two? So whether there's any surgical conditions can cause us a problem in the right iliac fossa as well as in the perianal region. So that is how we have to correlate. So what is the most probable diagnosis? It's a diverticular disease of the colon, whether it is a diverticular disease of the colon or whether it is a Crohn's disease, whether it is an ulcerative colitis, whether it is a carcinoma of the cecum or whether it's a carcinoma of the appendix. So that is what we need to discuss in this single best answer question. So we should know there are some underlying risk factors for anorectal abscess. So what are the underlying risk factors? There will be an immunocompromised state. Whenever a person is having any immunocompromised state, they can develop anorectal abscesses. Even if anyone is getting a chemotherapy, or even after the organ transplantation, whenever a patient is on immunosuppressive therapies, so they can develop anorectal abscess. So that is the most important underlying conditions the patient can develop anorectal abscess. The second one is the Crohn's disease. So remember, Crohn's disease can cause us perianal abscess or anorectal abscess. So the previous questions, you can understand why the problem it's in the right iliac fossa as well as the perianal abscess formation or anorectal abscess formation because of Crohn's disease. And everybody know that Crohn's disease commonly affects the terminal ileum or ileocecal area. So that is why the patient will be having a problem in the right iliac fossa. At the same time, they can have a problem in the perianal area as well as a perianal abscess. Not only the anorectal abscess, even the fissure formation or any other anorectal conditions are common with Crohn's disease compared with ulcerative colitis. So ulcerative colitis, even though it affects the colon, they don't present with perianal conditions. So perianal conditions are common with Crohn's disease. So that is one of the most important things we need to understand. Then whenever there's an undiagnosed fistula in ano, whenever the fistula ano is not diagnosed properly, the patient will comes with a recurrent abscess formation or anorectal abscess formation. So that is also one of the underlying conditions or risk factors for anorectal abscess. Then the diabetes mellitus. Whenever a patient is having diabetes mellitus, they are more prone to have certain infections. So anorectal abscess also one of the condition. It is more the diabetic patients more prone to develop. The other infectious condition the diabetes mellitus people are very commonly present with is, what is that? Anyone? So the commonest condition, the other common infectious condition that is the diabetes patient presents with is carbuncle. We call it a carbuncle. Usually the carbuncle can affect the back or even any area, abdomen or any areas. It is one of the skin sepsis, and that is also common in diabetes mellitus. So same kind of things, anorectal sepsis as well as anorectal abscess also common with diabetes mellitus. The other one is the AIDS. AIDS again, it's a part of an immunocompromised state as well. So that is also can develop anorectal abscesses. So these are the underlying risk factors we need to identify whenever somebody comes with a recurrent anorectal abscesses. So whenever there's a recurrent anorectal abscess, these are the underlying risk factors we need to exclude in any patients. So what are the presentations of anorectal abscess? So the common presentation is the severe pain. They will be having an increasingly severe pain, and it is very, very well localized pain. And 95% of the time we can palpate a tender lump. So that is again the common presentation of anorectal abscess. So painful, palpable, tender lump is the common presentation of anorectal abscess. Sometimes the submucous abscess, sometimes we can't feel through the skin. So whenever we do a digital rectal examination, patient will have a severe tenderness, as well as we can feel as just a mass inside the anus, a soft cystic mass inside the anus. So that indicates it's a submucous abscess. All the other 95% of the time we can feel a tender lump whenever it comes to anorectal abscess. Some people will have a fever, and this fever is having a features of swinging type of fever, and the patient will have a chills and rigors. So this kind of an abscess, this kind of a presentation is common with ischiorectal abscess. So 18% of the people will have a swinging type of fever, and this fever is common with ischiorectal abscess. So commonest type of anorectal abscess is perianal abscess, and perianal abscess is very superficial. So because of that, usually they don't develop a swinging type of fever. But whenever they develop an ischiorectal abscess, that is very deep-seated abscess, and it will fill up the ischiorectal space. So because of that, they can have swinging type of fever. That is one of the presentation of anorectal abscess. Sometimes they present with perianal discharge. So perianal discharge, again, we have to check whether there's any underlying perianal fistula as well in this patient. So perianal discharge also one of the presentation. And sometimes whenever there's a deep-seated abscess, deep-seated anorectal abscess, patient will present with features of septicemia. So that's also a presentation of anorectal abscess. Again, what's the other true or false question? Which of the following will mimic anorectal abscess? So these are not anorectal abscesses, but whether it will, what are the conditions that will mimic as anorectal abscess? Whether it is a hidradenitis suppurativa, or whether it is a Bartholian gland abscess, whether it is a tuberculosis, pilonidal abscess, or a anal cancer. So what are the conditions that will mimic as anorectal abscess? So that is why the differential diagnosis is important when it comes to anorectal abscess, because these are the conditions that can mimic as anorectal abscess. So pilonidal sinus or pilonidal abscess is one of the entity that occurs in the natal cleft, and sometimes that will mimic as anorectal abscess, but it is a different entity. So that is one of the differential diagnoses. Hidradenitis suppurativa. So hidradenitis suppurativa is usually commonly occurs in the axilla. Sometimes it occurs around the umbilicus. Hidradenitis suppurativa can occur around the umbilicus, and even it can occur around the perianal region. So that is also will mimic as perianal abscess. Sometimes folliculitis, any periprostatic abscesses, even Bartholian gland abscess, and whenever there's an actinomycosis, all that can mimic as anorectal abscess. So these are the differential diagnosis of anorectal abscess. Again, another true or false question regarding anorectal abscess. The pus culture and ABST is mandatory in all abscesses. So we need to know whether sending a pus culture, whether it is a mandatory for our management plan. So that is the first thing we need to discuss about in this question. And the second one, antibiotics are given to all patients with anorectal abscess. So whether do we have to give antibiotics to each and every anorectal abscesses? So that is the other important questions we need to address. Next one, the cruciate incision during drainage reduces the fistula formation. So why we need to do cruciate incision? Whether it is necessary in perianal abscess, and if we do it, how it reduces the fistula formation. So that is the other important things we need to discuss. And Staphylococcus aureus detected in the pus culture increases the risk of fistula formation. That is already we have discussed. Whenever the pus culture shows it's a E. coli or a bowel organism, the chances of forming a fistula formation is higher. But when it comes to Staphylococcus aureus, the chances of developing a fistula formation is less. Surgical drainage is the mainstay of management. So we need to know whether it is antibiotic is the mainstay of management, or whether it is a surgical drainage is the mainstay of management. So these are the questions we need to address. So when it comes to management of anorectal abscess, who needs IV antibiotic or antimicrobial therapy? So antimicrobial therapy is not necessary for each and every patient with anorectal abscess. Whenever anorectal abscess is very superficial and it is very small, the antibiotics are not necessary. The reason is the mainstay of management of any anorectal abscess is surgical drainage. So whenever we do surgical drainage and whenever we remove the pus, then there's no need of antimicrobial therapy after that. But there are some patients it's indicated. But other patients the antimicrobial therapy is indicated. Whenever there's a spreading cellulitis around the anorectal abscess, yes, we need to give some antimicrobial therapy. And any diabetic patients. So diabetic patients, they are more prone to have a severe form of any infections. So we need to give some antimicrobial therapy for these people. Or anyone presents with any features of sepsis, any tachycardia, swinging type of fever, and the blood pressure is it's low. So any features of septicemia, so then we have to give a antimicrobial therapy. So these are the indications to give antimicrobial therapy in anorectal abscess. So if it is a question comes and anybody asks whether we need to give antimicrobial therapy each and every patient with anorectal abscess, the answer is no. It is not necessary in each and every cases with anorectal abscess. Why? Because the mainstay of management is surgical drainage. So when it comes to surgical drainage, the incision should be a cruciate incision. So cruciate incision is very, very important in perianal abscess. The other place we put cruciate incision is again the carbuncle. So carbuncle and perianal abscess or anorectal abscesses are the areas we put cruciate incisions to drain all the pus or any infected material from inside. So anorectal abscess, again, the cruciate incision is very important. And where we put the incision, it is whenever there's a most fluctuant point or whenever there's a tender area. So that is the area we have to put a cruciate incision over there. So whether it is a most fluctuant point or whenever there's no fluctuant point, whether it is an increased or tender area, we need to put cruciate incision. And after the cruciate incision, we have to break all the loculi because anorectal abscesses is formed as some loculi. So if you don't break all the loculi, then all this, there are some part of an abscess will remains inside and then later develop as a recurrent anorectal abscesses or a fistula formation. And the other important thing is whenever we put a cruciate incision, we have to excise the skin edges. So that is called de-roofing of the abscess. Right? De-roofing of the abscess, that is we have to excise the skin edges. Why we have to do this? Because the anal skin, it has an increased blood supply. So whenever we do any incisions over the anal skin, it will heal very well. So we don't have to suture any incisions over the anal region because it will heal very well. So whenever we do the incision for a anorectal abscess, if we just put a linear incision, then that will heal very quickly, but underneath that there will be an abscess cavity. The abscess cavity won't heal whenever we do just a linear incision only, because linear incision will heal and it will close up, but underneath there will be an abscess cavity. So the healing should occur from the abscess cavity, from the base of abscess cavity, and it should be filled up, and then only it will come to the skin level, and then the skin should heal. Otherwise they will develop a recurrent fistula formation. So that is why you have to do cruciate incision. After doing a cruciate incisions, we need to cut the edges of that cruciate incision. That is called de-roofing of the abscess. Next one, pus for microbiology. So usually in most of the abscesses, whenever we drain, we usually, as a principle, we send the pus for culture or microbiology. But perianal abscess, the main management is the surgical management, and I have told you already the antimicrobial therapy is not necessary for each and every cases. Then the pus for microbiology is not mandatory, because we are not going to give any antibiotic after doing a surgical drainage in most of the cases. So that is why it is not mandatory. But what is the most important thing about the pus for microbiology or pus culture is, if we detect the organism that is coming from the bowel or E. coli, mainly it is a E. coli, then we can tell the patient, or we can there's a possibility of developing a perianal fistula formation is possible with E. coli. But when it is the pus culture comes as Staphylococcus aureus, then we can reassure the patient there are very less chance they can develop anal fistula. So that is the important aspect we will get with the microbiology, pus for microbiology. But otherwise, it is not mandatory, because we don't treat with antibiotic in each and every cases according to the pus culture. So that is why it is not mandatory, but the fistula formation can be predictable with the pus culture. So that is the most important things about pus culture. Then the tissue from the wall should be sent for histology. So that is also, it is necessary, because we can exclude some specific cause, whether it is formed by any other underlying conditions. The anorectal abscess is formed by any underlying conditions, can be assessed with the tissue wall for histology. So that is the important management. So antimicrobial therapy is not necessary for each and every cases with anorectal abscess. There are some indication, and the most important management is surgical drainage. And during the surgical drainage, we need to put a cruciate incision, and then we have to break all the loculi. So this is how we do surgical drainage. We have to put a cruciate incision, and then we have to cut all the edges of that cruciate incision. Then the wound will looks like a diamond shape. Then we have to break all the loculi inside the abscess, and then we will leave this wound open. We don't suture. So in this case, what will happen? The wound, the external part of the wound is very bigger compared to the internal part. So because of this, the healing will occur from the base. So the wounds will be filled up from the base, and the wound will heal very well, and the chance of developing fistula formation is less. So that is the important things about the surgical drainage. So what are the complications of anorectal abscess? So when it comes to complication, mainly you have to think about two complications. It may be a fistula formation. So about 26 to 37% of people can develop fistula formation, or they can have a sepsis or a septicemia. So these are the main complications of anorectal abscess. Septicemia as well as the fever are less with perianal abscess. Perianal abscess is the commonest type. But when it comes to ischiorectal abscess, that is a very deep-seated abscess. So the features of septicemia as well as the swinging type of fever is common with ischiorectal abscess. So these are the complications we should know when it comes to anorectal abscess. So we will see what are the questions we have discussed earlier. So this is the first question we have discussed, true or false. So perianal abscess managed non-surgically is false, right? So we need to manage surgically. So surgery is the mainstay of management in perianal abscess. So that is false. Cryptoglandular in origin, yes. So we have seen there are two theories, cryptoglandular theory as well as the organism can cause anorectal abscess from the skin appendages or skin common cells. So that is, again, it is part of it, but majority are cryptoglandular in origin, so that is true. Patients with diabetes mellitus are affected mostly. So it is diabetes mellitus is one of the precipitating cause for anorectal abscess or perianal abscess, so that is true. Commoner in males than females, yes, that is again true. It is more common in males. And needs breaking of all loculi during drainage, yes, it's mandatory. We need to break all the loculi, otherwise there are some foci of abscesses will remain inside, and then that will cause us a recurrent abscess formation or a fistula formation. The other area we do breaking of all loculi is breast abscess. Breast abscess also the same. we have to break all the loculi when it comes to breast abscess. So these are the important things about anorectal abscess when it comes to surgical management. Either true or false, perianal abscess leads to the development of fistula in ano. Yes. So whenever there's a fistula in ano, the patient previously had some kind of a perianal abscess or anorectal abscess, so that's true. Relatively painless, it's false, because the painful tender lump is the commonest presentation of any perianal abscess or anorectal abscess. So it is relatively painless is false. But when it comes to fistula, fistulas are relatively painless, but perianal abscesses are relatively, it is painful, so it is false. And it presents with fever. Yes, perianal abscess, it can present with fever, so that is one of the presentation, but it is less compared to the anorectal abscess. It's drained by cruciate incision. Yes, it is mandatory. We have to put a cruciate incision and we have to cut the edges. Otherwise, the healing won't occur from the abscess cavity. So the healing should occur from the abscess cavity and the skin should close later on. Good healing after drainage reduces recurrence. Yes. So if a wound heals very well in perianal abscess after the incision and drainage, then it will reduce the recurrence. So that is true. Next, true or false question regarding anorectal abscess. Fistula formation is predictable. Now everybody can understand. Yes, that is true, because if it is organism is E. coli or a bowel organism, then the fistula formation we can predict. But when it comes to Staphylococcus aureus, we can reassure the patient the fistula formation is very, very rare. So common organism is Staphylococcus aureus. It's false, because common organism we have discussed is E. coli, and Staphylococcus aureus, it comes from the skin, so it is very less. So it is false. And surgical drainage is done when the fluctuation over the abscess is present. So it is true, whenever there's a fluctuation over the abscess is present, we can go for a surgical drainage, but we don't wait for fluctuation when it comes to anorectal abscess. That is, again, you have to know, whenever there's a fluctuant point, we put the cruciate incision over the fluctuant point in perianal abscess, or whenever there's no fluctuation, then we have to go for an incision over the most tender area. But we don't wait for fluctuation whenever there's a anorectal abscess. So you can remember, mainly there are other types of abscess also, we never wait for fluctuation. What are the other example? One is parotid abscess. When it comes to parotid abscess, the parotid capsule is very tough and it causes severe pain, and we don't wait for fluctuation when it comes to parotid abscess. The second one is pulp abscess in the fingertips. Whenever in the fingertips, the pulp, whenever you get an abscess, that is also, we should not wait for fluctuation. We have to go for an immediate incision and drainage whenever it comes to pulp abscess. Otherwise the pulp abscess can cause us increased pressure within the compartments, and that will cause us the cutoff of blood supply to the bone, and that will lead to osteomyelitis later on. So these are the places we never wait for fluctuation to drain an abscess. So what are the areas? Number one is the parotid abscess, second one is pulp abscess, and the third one is anorectal abscess. But whenever there's a fluctuant point, we go for a surgical drainage over there. Peak incidence occur in the 6th decade. No, we have discussed 3rd and 4th decade is the common peak age, so that is false. Ischiorectal abscess is the commonest type. Again, it's false. What is the commonest type is perianal abscess. Ischiorectal abscess is second to that, so that is not the commonest. Again, single best answer question. I have told you the patient is having a heaviness in the right iliac fossa, as well as there's a mass over the right iliac fossa and the patient presents with perianal problem. Fissure, fistula, perianal abscess, anorectal abscess, anything, any perianal conditions with some abdominal mass in the right iliac fossa. The common underlying condition is Crohn's disease. So in this question, the answer is Crohn's disease. True or false, which of the following will mimic anorectal abscess? Hidradenitis suppurativa, it's true. Bartholian gland abscess, true. Tuberculosis can cause perianal abscess, or sometimes tuberculosis can mimic as perianal abscess as well. So tuberculosis is again, it is true. Pilonidal abscess, yes, pilonidal abscess can mimic as perianal abscess, so that is also true. And the anal cancer. So anal cancer, sometimes patient will present with severe pain as well as there's a tender lump. So severe pain and the tender lump will indicate it is mimic as perianal or anorectal abscess, so that is also true. So true or false regarding anorectal abscess, pus culture and ABST is mandatory in all abscesses. So I told you that it is not mandatory, but it is better to send for pus culture because we can predict the fistula formation with that. It is not alter our antibiotic therapy or anything, but it will predict the fistula formation, so that is the better things, but it is not mandatory. Antibiotics are given to all patients with anorectal abscess. It's false. It is given whenever there's a spreading cellulitis, or whenever patient is diabetes, or whenever the patient is having any features of septicemia, then we have to give an antibiotic, otherwise not necessary. Cruciate incision during drainage reduces the fistula formation. Yes, that is what we have discussed, that's true. Staphylococcus aureus detected in the pus culture increases the chance of fistula formation is false, because Staphylococcus aureus usually don't cause fistula formation, but when it comes to E. coli or a bowel organism, the chance of fistula formation is common. Surgical drainage is the mainstay of management. Yes, that is the most important management when it comes to anorectal abscess. So this one, again one of the single best answer question. A 40-year-old male presented with wetting of underpants for about 1 month duration. He has undergone surgery for lump around the anus few months back. So what does that indicate? Patient has undergone some surgery for a lump, so that is anorectal abscess, and now he comes with a perianal discharge. So what is the most probable diagnosis? So most probable diagnosis is it's perianal fistula. So that is the answer for this single best answer question. So next, the perianal sepsis. The entity of perianal sepsis is fistula in ano. So again, it is very common as anorectal abscesses. This is also one of the common condition. So we need to discuss about that. Okay, so before we discuss about fistula in ano, we will do some questions, true or false question. So fistula in ano is usually a consequence of perianal abscess, true or false. It needs fistulogram before definitive treatment, whether it is true or false. Whether the complex fistulae are assessed by MRI scanning and may present with bleeding per rectum. Whether the fistula in ano can present with bleeding per rectum, yes, true or false. Or may be due to inflammatory diseases, fistula in ano. So that is what we need to discuss. Next question, fistula in ano, usually it is painful, whether it is painful or painless. Cetones are useful in the treatment. Whether the fecal incontinence may follow fistulectomy. It never communicates with the bladder, or it is recurs after treatment. So whether it is true or false, we need to discuss about that. This is one of the SCQ questions. A 30-year-old male presented with recurrent perianal discharge for 3 months duration. He has undergone incision and drainage for perianal abscess 6 months ago. So what is the most probable diagnosis and define the condition. So whenever you go, what is the most probable diagnosis? The diagnosis is perianal fistula or fistula in ano. But you need to define the condition. So you have to give a definition. What is a fistula in ano? List 4 possible causes for this condition. So we have to know what are the causes that can lead to perianal fistula, and describe the investigations and treatment of this patient. So we have to know what are the investigations available whenever somebody comes with the fistula in ano, and how we treat, and define the term Goodsell's rule. So when it comes to fistula in ano, there's one rule we need to discuss, that is called Goodsell's rule. So we need to find out what is Goodsell's rule. So fistula in ano, the definition of fistula in ano is a chronic abnormal communication. So the chronic word is important, as well as the abnormal communicative tract is important, and it is lined by infected granulation tissue. And how the tract runs, it is in between the anorectal mucosal lining internally and perianal skin externally. So that is the definition of fistula in ano. So in the previous question, the CQ questions, if somebody asks you to define what is fistula in ano, you have to tell this definition. And according to this, there will be an internal opening and there will be an external opening whenever it comes to fistula in ano. So internal openings are, it is coming from the rectum or it is from the anus. So whenever the internal opening is in the anus, it is superficial. The fistula is usually superficial. Whenever the opening is in the rectum, internal opening is in the rectum, the fistulas are deep or it is higher up. So that is why the internal opening is very important to find out, important to assess when it comes to fistula in ano. The external opening, it can occur in the perineal skin, or it can occur into the buttock, or there can be a fistula formation to the vagina. So external opening is commonly occurs in the perineal skin. So that is the common type, but sometimes they can have an external opening in the buttocks as well. So these are the opening is important, whether it is an internal opening or whether it is what are the internal opening and what are the external opening. So again, fistula in ano is more common in males as anorectal abscess. So it is more common in males, and common age group is 20 to 50 years. So again, this is also same as anorectal abscess. The age group is same as anorectal abscess, as well as the gender is also same as anorectal abscess. So this is again give the clue that anorectal abscesses can become a anorectal fistula in ano. So what are the causes of fistula in ano? So commonly it is the same infection, the cryptoglandular infection that is forming an abscess, and then later on it is causing a fistula in ano is the commonest type. So 90% of the time fistula in ano is the sequelae of cryptoglandular infection and abscess formation. So that is the commonest type. But there are some other causes as well. There are Crohn's disease, there can be a diverticulitis, even tuberculosis, or even lymphogranuloma venereum, actinomycosis, even any malignancies. Any malignancies around the anal region can lead to fistula in ano. Sometimes there can be a trauma. So trauma is also one of the cause for fistula in ano. And sometimes there will be a foreign body. So if a person is having a recurrent fistula formation, then we have to exclude any of these underlying conditions when it comes to fistula in ano. But commonly it is due to the cryptoglandular infection and the perianal or anorectal abscess formation. The malignancy, I want to tell you an important thing about malignancy. Malignancy can lead to fistula in ano. Sometimes whenever there's a malignancy, people can have a perianal discharge through the fistula in ano. At the same time, whenever somebody is having a prolonged period of fistula, then again that fistula, the malignancies can arise from that fistula as well. So both way, the malignancy is related to fistula in ano. So malignancy can cause fistula in ano, and fistula in ano can give rise to malignancy as well. So these are the causes of fistula in ano we need to know. So again, another true or false question regarding the types of fistulas. High anal fistula can lead to incontinence if laid open. So we need to know what you mean by high anal fistulas. And difficulties faced in the management of fistula is called complex fistula, whether it is correct or not. Transsphincteric fistulae are the commonest type. So we need to find out what are the types of fistulas and what is the commonest type of fistula. So that is important. An intersphincteric fistula cross the external sphincter. So we need to know whether what do you mean by intersphincteric fistulae. And suprasphincteric fistulae are iatrogenic. So we need to know whether it is what is mean by suprasphincteric fistulae and whether what is the cause for that. So that is the causes of fistula formation we need to identify in this true or false question. So classification. When it is classification, there are three types of classification. We can do it in fistula formation. We can tell it is a high or a low fistula, or we can tell it whether it is a simple or a complex fistula, or it can be a the Parkes classification. We have to go whether there's a Parkes classification. So these are the classification of fistula. So when it comes to classification of fistulas, we have to identify whether it is a high or low fistulas, simple or complex fistula, or what is the classification according to the Parkes. So that is the classification we need to discuss. So when it comes to high or a low fistulas, high fistula, what do you mean by high fistula? It is just a general term it is used. That is, when it comes to high, it is the opening is in the higher up portion. So whenever we do fistulectomy or a fistulotomy in that kind of a fistulas, and whenever we lay it open, then they have an increased chance to develop incontinence. They have a high risk of incontinence. So that is what it is mean by high fistulas. Low fistulas, whenever the surgeries are done for low fistulas, the risk of incontinence is very low. So this is a type of fistulas, one of the classification, the high or a low fistulas. When it comes to the next classification, simple versus complex. So complex is whenever the primary tract crosses the sphincter, the level where the primary tract is crosses, that is whenever the level is very higher up, so then it comes under the complex fistula. Or whenever there are secondary extension. So in the fistula we have two kinds of tract. You have a primary tract and you have a secondary tract. So primary tract, usually there's an internal opening as well as external opening, and there's a tract in between that opening. So that's called primary tract. And there are some secondary extension as well from the primary tract. So that is what we call secondary tract. So whenever there's a secondary tract, then again that will give, that will tell it is a complex fistula. Next one is the difficulties in treatment. Whenever the treatment of fistula is very difficult, then that is also called a complex fistula. So these are the important things we need to identify as a complex fistula. If these are not there, then it is called a simple fistula. So simple versus complex is also one of the classification we need to know about a fistula in ano. So Parkes classification, so you should know there are 4 types of fistula according to the Parkes classification. We go for intersphincteric fistula, so majority, that is 45% of the time it is a intersphincteric fistula, 30% of the time it is a transsphincteric fistula, and suprasphincteric as well as extrasphincteric fistulas are rare. So common type are types are intersphincteric fistula as well as transsphincteric fistula. So this is what we call intersphincteric fistula. This is the commonest type, and you can see the fistula is in between the internal sphincter as well as the external sphincter. So that is why we call it an intersphincteric fistula. And you can see the internal opening is through the internal sphincter. So the fistula crosses the internal sphincter, but it does not cross the external sphincter. So you should know the intersphincteric fistulas don't cross the external sphincters, but it will cross the internal sphincter only. And you can see the external opening is very close to the anal verge. So the external opening is very close to the anal verge when it comes to intersphincteric fistula. So these are the 2 points you should know in intersphincteric fistula. Number 1, intersphincteric fistulas don't cross the external sphincter, it is cross only the internal sphincter. Second one is external opening is very close to the anal verge. So these are the 2 important things we need to know about the intersphincteric fistula. So that's the commonest type. When it comes to transsphincteric fistula, the fistula's tract will cross the external sphincter as well as the internal sphincter both. So that is why we call it a transsphincteric fistula. And the external opening is away from anal verge. So that is what we discuss about transsphincteric fistula. Then we have a suprasphincteric fistula. That is, again, it is very rare. So that is, again, the fistula's tract goes above the external sphincters, and then it opens into the rectum or anal canal. So it is very, very rare. Usually it is due to iatrogeny or a trauma. So whenever there's an iatrogenic or a trauma, that can lead to suprasphincteric fistulas. The other rare type of fistula is extrasphincteric fistula. So whenever the communication, internal communication, or the way how the tract travels is complex, then we call it an extrasphincteric fistula. So extrasphincteric fistula, usually whenever there's a pelvic sepsis or even a pelvic pathology, then people will develop an extrasphincteric fistula. That is, again, it is very rare. So you should know there are 4 types of fistula. Out of that, the intersphincteric fistula is the commonest type. So that is according to how it crosses the external and the internal anal sphincter, we divide the fistulas into 4. So when it comes to Goodsell's rule, what Goodsell's rule say, when you put the patient in lithotomy position, and when the position of the anus is divided in the lithotomy position, anterior and posterior, and whenever there's a fistula in the anterior part of that line, then that is drained directly into the anus or rectum. But when it comes to the posterior fistulas, that is the fistulas posterior to the line that is transecting the anus, then they will have a horseshoe pattern, and then that will drain in the middle. So that is what Goodsell's rule say. So it is middle means it's a 6 o'clock position. So that will drain at 6 o'clock position. So anterior fistulas drain directly, and the posterior fistulas, they have a horseshoe draining pattern, and that will drain into the 6 o'clock position. So that is what Goodsell's rule say. But whether it is always true is no, right? It is not always true, but most of the time it is correct. But there are some exceptions. If it is an anterior tract and the external opening is away from or more than 3 centimeters from the anus, then the rule cannot be applicable, because that can drain even in a horseshoe pattern, or even it can drain into the posterior part of the anus or a rectum. So that is one of the exceptions. So Goodsell's rules are not always true, but most of the time it is correct. So clinical features, when it comes to clinical features, the perianal discomfort, and there will be itching as well as irritation, there's a discharge will be there, purulent or a bloody discharge. There can be a tender lump. So whenever the fistula is forming an abscess formation, they can develop a tender lump. And the external opening with, whenever we express the opening, there can be a pus that will express through the external opening. So that is also one of the presentation. And sometimes we can, whenever we do a digital rectal examination, we can feel a nodule inside as an internal opening. So that is also one of the presentation of fistula in ano. So whenever a patient complains of whenever they pass flatus or feces through some external opening, that again it is one of the presentation of fistula in ano. But the important thing is the internal opening is most probably it is in the rectum. Whenever the internal opening is in the anus, they don't usually present with feces or a flatus passing through the external opening. So the internal opening when it is in the rectum, they present with passing flatus and feces. And most important point is the pain is rare. Pain is not the common presentation of fistula in ano. When it comes to anorectal abscess, the pain is very, very important when it comes to anorectal abscess, and that is the commonest presentation. But when it comes to fistula in ano, pain is rare. So these are the clinical features we need to know about fistula in ano. Next one, we have to assess the fistula in ano. So what are the key points in the assessment of fistula in ano? So first, there are 5 key points we need to address. Number 1, we have to find out where is the internal opening. Second, we have to find out where is the external opening, and what is the course of the primary tract, how the primary tract travels. So I have told you there are 2 types of tract. You have a primary tract as well as secondary tract or a secondary extension. So we have to find out whether the primary tract, how the course of the primary tract is there, whether there is any presence of secondary extension or a secondary tract is there. So that is also we have to find out when it comes to an assessment of fistula, and whether there is any other underlying complications or any other underlying condition is associated with fistula. So that is also we need to identify when it comes to fistula in ano. So how we will assess? So we have discussed about the key points. What are the key points for assessment? But how will you assess? So there are basic investigation and special investigation. So in the basic investigation, usually we do proctoscopy, and through the proctoscopy you can see whether there is any internal opening in the anus as well as in the distal rectum. So that is one of the basic investigation we do for the assessment of fistula tract. Now we can go for a sigmoidoscopy. Sigmoidoscopy again is useful to see whether there is any underlying conditions in the anorectum. So that is again one of the important investigation. And the examination under anesthesia. So whenever the examination in under anesthesia, you can identify the external opening as well as the internal opening, and sometimes we can use diluted hydrogen peroxide. So diluted hydrogen peroxide, sometimes you can inject into the external opening, and then you can see that is the hydrogen peroxide, the foam is coming through the internal opening. So that is one of the way to identify the internal opening when it comes to fistula in ano. So that can be done with the examination under anesthesia. Or we can put a probe into the external opening, and then gently we can see whether how this probe goes inside, and then we can detect the internal opening with that. So that is what we do in examination under anesthesia. So these are the basic assessment of fistula tract. You can have a proctoscopy, you can have a sigmoidoscopy, or you can have an examination under anesthesia. So when it comes to special investigation, so special investigations are done for recurrent fistulas as well as complex fistulas. So whenever there's a recurrent fistula or a complex fistulas, we can go for a transanal ultrasonography, or whenever there's a pelvic MRI, that is considered as a gold standard investigation. So any perianal problem or a pelvic problem, the gold standard investigation is MRI. So whenever there's a complex fistula, recurrent fistulas, and we wanted to find out the primary tract as well as the secondary extension, the best investigation is MRI. So that is one of the special investigation. And sometimes we can go for a fistulogram. So fistulogram, you can inject some contrast into the fistula and then you take the film. So that is what we call fistulogram. This is very useful in extrasphincteric fistulas. It is not usually done for transsphincteric or intersphincteric fistulas, but whenever we suspect a extrasphincteric fistulas, then the fistulogram is very helpful. So these are the investigations we need to discuss. The first one is the basic investigation, and the second one there are special investigation, and out of this special investigation, the pelvic MRI is the better option. Management. What's the management of fistula in ano? When it comes to a management, we can do a fistulotomy, or we can go for a fistulectomy, or sometimes we have to do a ceton insertion as well. So what's the difference between fistulotomy and fistulectomy? Fistulotomy is just cutting the fistulous tract and leave it open. So whenever it is leave it open, after cutting the fistulous tract, it is called fistulotomy. If we remove the fistulous tract, the whole fistulous tract, if we remove, that is called fistulectomy. So there's a difference between fistulotomy. So fistulotomy, we just open the tract and we cured all the inside granulation tissues, and then the tract is laid open. So that is called fistulotomy. But if you remove the whole tract, that is called fistulectomy. And sometimes we can go for a ceton insertion, ceton wire. So if we think the fistulas are higher up, as well as we need to investigate the fistulous tract, how the fistulous primary tract and the secondary tract, how it is travels, and if we need to investigate that kind of a complex fistulas, then we can go for just a ceton insertion, and then we can leave the ceton. So ceton insertion is again one of the management option in fistulous tract. And there are two types of ceton. We can go for a loose ceton, or we can go for a cutting ceton. So these are the two types of ceton wires or ceton insertion is done. So there are some other management option as well. One is the ligation of the intersphincteric fistula. So that is, you divide the fistulous tract and then you can ligate the internal part of the fistula. So that is called the ligation of the intersphincteric fistula. So this is done for intersphincteric fistula. So that is the commonest type, and we can go for a ligation is one of the management. Or we can go for an advancement flap. So we can put a flap we can excise the fistulous tract, as well as we can go for an advancement flaps as well. There are some biological agents, but that is not proven benefit still. But there are some biological agents that's available. We can plug with the fibrin glue, or we can plug the fistulous tract with pores in small intestinal submucosa. So these comes under the biological agents. So when it comes to management of fistula in ano, you should know the main managements are: we can go for a fistulotomy. If it is very superficial fistula, we can go for a fistulotomy. And also sometimes we can go for a fistulectomy, that is, we remove the whole fistulous tract. Or if it is a fistula is higher up, then we can go for a ceton insertion. So there are two types of ceton, that is loose ceton and the cutting ceton. And there are some other types of management as well. So that is the importance about the management of fistula in ano. So we came to the end of the lecture, so we will go to the question. So this we have started with the true or false question. Fistula in ano is usually a consequence of perianal abscess. Yes, that is how the fistula in ano is usually forms. It needs fistulogram before definitive treatment. No, it is not always, right? Whenever we think about the extrasphincteric fistulas, then it is helpful, but it is not necessary in all the cases. Complex fistula assessed by MRI scanning, yes, that is the gold standard investigations when it comes to complex fistula, so that is true. May present with bleeding per rectum, yes, because whenever the fistulous tract is usually contain the granulation tissue, so whenever there's an infection of the granulation tissue, again they can develop some bleeding from that, so they can present as bleeding when it comes to fistula in ano. May be due to inflammatory diseases, yes, the common inflammatory disease is the Crohn's disease, so the Crohn's disease can give rise to fistula in ano as well. Next question, fistula in ano, usually painful. So we have discussed anorectal abscess is painful, but when it comes to fistulas, it is not painful, so that is false. Usually painful is false, it is commonly painless. Cetones are useful in the treatment, yes, whenever there's a higher fistulas, the better option is cetone rather than going for a fistulotomy or a fistulectomy, so that is again true. Fecal incontinence may follow fistulectomy. Yes, whenever we do a fistulectomy, when we damage the sphincters, then there will be a possibility of fecal incontinence. So that is why whenever there's a higher fistulas, we prefer cetone rather than going for a fistulotomy or a fistulectomy. So that is also true. Never communicates with bladder, that is false. Because whenever there's a secondary tract, whenever the primary tract and the secondary tract, sometimes the secondary tract, at least the secondary tract will communicate with bladder in some cases. So it is never communicates with the bladder is false. And it is recurs after treatment. Yes, fistula in ano, usually it can recur whenever there's an underlying condition is there, or if it is a fistula management is inadequate, then they can recur again. So that is also true. So this is SCQ, so you can answer this one with all this, whatever we have done so far. So true or false again, regarding the types of fistulas, high anal fistulas can lead to incontinence if laid open. So that is what we discussed, it's a high anal fistula, so that is true. Difficulties faced in the management of fistula is called complex fistula. Yes, that is again true. Transsphincteric fistula are the commonest type. No, we have discussed it's an intersphincteric fistula is the commonest type, so that is false. Intersphincteric fistulae cross the external sphincter, false. We have discussed intersphincteric fistulae, it won't cross the external sphincter, but it will cross the internal sphincter only. So that is false. And suprasphincteric fistulae are iatrogenic. Yes, so that is again, we discussed if it is a suprasphincteric fistula, it is rare and it is maybe related to trauma or iatrogenic. Okay, that is all we have to discuss about the anorectal sepsis. So when it comes to anorectal sepsis, the most important, the base is how it is formed and how it is causing the complications. All it should be understood, and every medical personnel should know about the anorectal sepsis. And there are two types of anorectal sepsis we have discussed. One is anorectal abscess and the other one is the perianal fistula or fistula in ano. So these are the most important conditions that we have to know when it comes to perianal anorectal sepsis. Okay, thank you.